Let me show you something. 少年少年心脏心臓電話電話
Wow, Japanese and Chinese are so alike. So it must be really easy for Chinese people to learn Japanese or the other way around.
Is it really that simple? Hi everyone, I'm Yu. Today we're diving into a question I get asked a lot. Is it easy or hard for Chinese people to learn Japanese? Both Chinese and Japanese are ranked among the hardest languages for English speakers to learn. But what about learning Japanese as a native Chinese speaker? I was born and raised in China, studied Japanese as my second major in university, went on to pursue Japanese linguistics in grad school, and worked in Japan for a year. So I guess I've earned the right to speak on this topic. Is Japanese really easier for Chinese learners or not? Just to be clear, in this video we're only talking about standard Mandarin Chinese and standard Japanese, not the dialects of either country. For those of you who might not be very familiar with Chinese or Japanese, let me first give you a quick intro on Chinese characters, called Hanzi in Chinese and Kanji in Japanese. The earliest known form of Chinese characters dates all the way back to around 14th century BCE during China's Shang dynasty. They were called oracle bone script, basically stylized drawings carved into bones. Fast forward to the 3rd century BCE, during the Qing dynasty, the Chinese writing system had become more standardized. By the 1st and 2nd century, a style called clerical script matured, and by the 3rd to 6th centuries, regular script was developed, which, by the way, looks almost identical to modern traditional Chinese characters. Around the 4th to 5th century, Chinese characters were introduced to Japan and were initially used simply as a tool for writing. From the 6th to 9th centuries, Japan began systematically studying Chinese characters and Chinese writing, producing classics like Nihon Shoki and Kojiki, written entirely in Chinese. Then, they started using Chinese characters just for their sounds, not their meanings, a system called Manyō-gana. It's kind of like using Chinese characters as an alphabet. Okay, it's not entirely accurate, but you get the idea. Eventually, around the 9th to 10th centuries, Japan developed its own phonetic scripts, kana, including hiragana, which evolved from Chinese cursive script, and katakana, which came from simplified parts of Chinese regular script. This marked the moment where Japanese writing officially split off from Chinese, though Chinese characters, kanji, still remain a core part of the system. So to sum it up, Chinese is written entirely with Chinese characters, Hanzi. It conveys both meaning and sound. Japanese is written using a mix of kanji and kana. Kana represents sounds and shows the pronunciation of kanji. I'll give examples later. Then came the Meiji Restoration. As Japan imported Western ideas, science, philosophy, they had to create a ton of new vocabulary. So they coined a bunch of new words using Chinese characters, called Wasei Kango, Japan-made Chinese words. Many of them were borrowed back into Chinese, and we still use them today. Because of this tangled history and plenty of cultures, both languages use Chinese characters, which makes them look similar on paper. So much so that a Chinese speaker might be able to read signs in Japan without knowing any Japanese. And this also sparked a fake Chinese meme online in Japan. So, does that mean it's super easy for Chinese and Japanese speakers to learn each other's language? Before answering that question, let me quickly walk you through my own learning experience. I studied Japanese as part of my college major in China. By the first semester of my junior year, I passed the N1 in one go. If we do a rough estimate, that's a little over 1,000 study hours to reach N1. For those unfamiliar, N1 is the highest level of the Japanese Language Proficiency Test, or JLPT. To study in Japan, some programs with less focus on Japanese require N4 or N3. But for Japanese language programs, or if you want to work using Japanese, you generally need N2 or N1. To be honest, I wasn't exactly a super hardworking student, and also Japanese wasn't my only major. At my university, some of the best Japanese majors passed N1 as early as their 1st or 2nd year. And of course, some anime lovers can pass N1 even in just a few months of self-study. It might sound like Japanese is easy to learn, right? Well, a language certificate only reflects part of your ability. it doesn't necessarily mean you're fluent. I don't know if the standards were too lenient or what, but when I passed N1, I definitely didn't feel fluent in Japanese. I'm not criticizing the test itself. Every standardized exam has its own limits. After all, you can prepare for a test, but real-life conversation, that's full of surprises. It just got me thinking, what does it really mean to know a language? Let me use my own experience as an example. When I passed N1, I still felt like a total beginner. I was nowhere near being able to hold a smooth conversation with a native speaker. Then, I went to grad school and continued studying Japanese. I could write academic papers in Japanese, but still I struggled every time I spoke with a native professor. Then, I did an exchange program in Japan. Still, didn't feel like I had fully learned the language. I could communicate, but the moment someone spoke quickly, I'd lose track. Later, I started working in Japan and used Japanese in a professional setting. And still, there were so many moments when I knew exactly what I wanted to say, but just couldn't find the words in time. Even from the exchange program onward, most Japanese people I met would say, "Oh, 日本語すごく上手ですね." Maybe they were just saying that to be nice. Deep down, I never felt it was good enough. So here's the question. At what point can we say we truly know or have mastered a foreign language? When it comes to second language acquisition, people have very different expectations of what it means to have learned a language. Some people set the bar really high.
For now on, I only speak in proper American, so I don't embarrass you.
Others are more relaxed.
Any phrase I want to learn, I just say it in English and it spits it right back at me in Espanol. I'm sorry, I mean Spanish. I go back and forth without even noticing. Loco!
But if that's the standard, then Chinese native speakers can already recognize a ton of kanji Japanese characters without ever studying Japanese. So, if we lower the bar far enough, does that mean any Chinese speaker can claim they know Japanese? In the reverse, can Japanese people say they know Chinese just because they can guess some characters? Obviously no. When I looked into this, I came across a language proficiency model that breaks language ability down into areas like grammar and vocabulary coherence and using language appropriately in context. You can somewhat measure how much vocabulary someone knows, but things like fluency, coherence, and appropriateness are much harder to evaluate and highly subjective. So, if there's no clear benchmark for whether someone has mastered a language, how can we ever say how easy or hard it is to learn? But if I had to answer whether Japanese is easy for Chinese speakers to learn, I'd say, yes, we do have a huge advantage when it comes to Chinese characters, but it can also turn into a major source of confusion for Chinese learners. So next, let's break down the challenges the Chinese native speakers face when learning Japanese. Chinese and Japanese come from completely different language families. This means they have different historical roots, base vocabulary, grammar systems, and phonetics. Japanese has just 46 basic syllables, adding the compound ones, and you get around 112 in total. So pronunciation-wise, it's relatively simple compared to a lot of other languages. You think Chinese speakers have a huge advantage because Japanese also uses Chinese characters, right? That's true, but also not the whole story. Firstly, as we mentioned earlier, Japan adopted Chinese characters long ago, when they first started using them phonetically in systems like Man-yo-gana. Multiple Chinese characters were used for the same sound. So, not only did the pronunciation of Chinese characters change in Japanese, but characters that sound completely different in Chinese can end up having the same pronunciation in Japanese. For example, these Chinese characters in Mandarin Chinese are 思, 是, 资, 词, 子, 智, while in Japanese, 西西西西西西. On top of that, during the Tang and Song dynasties, Japan absorbed a lot of Chinese religious, academic, and literary texts. At the time, Chinese characters were considered the language of the elites. Over centuries of development, even though both languages use Chinese characters, the meaning and context of many words have diverged dramatically. Let's break that down. Number 1. Some kanji words in Japanese preserve ancient Chinese meanings that are no longer used in modern Mandarin. This Chinese character, 口, means mouth in both Chinese and Japanese. In ancient China, it was commonly used on its own to represent mouth, much like how it's still used in modern Japanese today, pronounced kuchi. But in modern Chinese, we no longer use 口 by itself in daily speech. We say 嘴 instead. While 口 still appears in many compound terms and set expressions such as 漱口, ring somebody's mouth, and 口舌之争, verbal dispute. Another example is the character 注. In ancient China, it was used to mean chopsticks, and you can still see it in Japanese with the same meaning, and pronounced hashi. But in modern Chinese, we don't use 注 for chopsticks anymore. Now we say 筷子. Number 2. Some kanji words in Japanese have taken on completely different meanings, a process called long word semantic change. For example, this word in Japanese, 大丈夫, means I'm okay. But in Chinese, it's pronounced 大丈夫 and is used to describe a strong, dependable man. And this word in Japanese, 勉強, means study, make an effort, or offer a discount. But in Chinese, 勉强, it means forcing someone to do something or doing something reluctantly. On second thought, the meanings aren't completely unrelated. If a word's meaning is different, it's fine. We just have to memorize the new meaning. But what really drives me crazy is when the meanings are just a little bit different. Here's something that happened to me. When I was studying in Japan, I once said to a Japanese friend, 〇〇ちゃんってすごく単純だね. She was a bit shocked and asked, なんで? It turned out that this word in Chinese, 单纯, often implies someone is innocent, pure-hearted, usually paired with kind or good-natured, maybe a little naive in a sweet way. But in Japanese, 単純, when describing a person, can imply they're simple-minded, not very sharp. The word in Japanese that really expresses my intended meaning was this word, 純粋, which in Chinese usually refers to something being pure in a physical or abstract sense, not commonly used to describe people. So even when words look the same, they carry subtle emotional or contextual differences that are easy to miss. And that's a real headache for native Chinese speakers. It's like a linguistic optical illusion. You think you understand, but you don't. This kind of mistake might be uniquely frustrating for Chinese speakers learning Japanese. Next, let's talk about grammar. The biggest structural difference between Chinese and Japanese is Chinese follows a subject, verb, object, word order, like English. Japanese follows subject, object, verb. For example, I sing songs. In Chinese, 我唱歌. In Japanese, 私は歌を歌う. Also, Chinese relies on word order and small particles for meaning. Japanese relies heavily on grammatical particles to mark the role of each word in a sentence. Another huge difference, still take I sing as an example. Chinese is an analytic language, there's basically no word inflection. Japanese is an agglutinative language. Verbs and adjectives change form with suffixes for tense, mood, and politeness. This kind of conjugation doesn't exist in Chinese, making Japanese grammar a big challenge for Chinese speakers. On top of that, to speak naturally, you have to build an instinct for the right tone and expression in different contexts. This is something all second language learners struggle with. That's why anime lovers often learn fast. Years of exposure gives them a head start in pronunciation, tone, and common phrases. So overall, Chinese speakers may find it easier to start Japanese, especially with reading kanji and basic vocabulary. But in terms of subtle word usage, grammar structure, and cultural nuance, it's not necessarily easier than learning any other foreign language. This might lead someone to ask,
Is it easier for Japanese people to learn Chinese then?
at first glance, it might seem like it. After all, they already know Chinese characters and Chinese grammar seems simpler, right? I'm not Japanese, so I can only make some educated guesses. Here's what I think. Number 1. Chinese grammar may look simple on the surface, but Chinese is actually a language that relies heavily on the context and feel. Because the rules are loose, it's also very flexible. This means native speakers often rely on nuance and subtle usage. So even if your grammar is technically correct, what you say might still feel off in more complex situations. Number 2. Pronunciation can be another hurdle. Japanese has a relatively simple sound system, and although pitch accent adds some variation, it's nowhere near as tonal as Chinese. So when Japanese learners face a more complex phonetic system like Mandarin, pronunciation becomes a major challenge.
This is my father.
Then there's the depth of Chinese itself. With thousands of years of history, Chinese is packed with rich impressions, from classical poetry to idioms and proverbs that are still commonly used. Some of these exist in Japanese too, but many are unique to Chinese and it can be hard for learners to master. Just like Chinese speakers might misuse certain words in Japanese because of subtle meaning differences, the reverse is probably true for Japanese learners of Chinese. One more thing, in recent years, there's been growing concern in Japan about declining kanji literacy among younger generations. More people rely on kana alone, which some say is becoming a social issue. And if we imagine an extreme scenario where Japan completely drops kanji and uses only kana, well, that would probably make it much harder for both sides to learn each other's language, but that's unlikely to happen in the near future. Have you ever seen those videos online where someone who doesn't look Asian goes to Japan and speaks perfectly fluent Japanese? But for some reason, Japanese people just miraculously don't understand them. It's a bit exaggerated, but also a pretty real cultural phenomenon. But for Chinese people, it's a different story. When chatting with Japanese people, sometimes we hear kanji-based words and don't quite catch the meaning right away. Actually, if they just show us how characters are written, we can understand. For Japanese people, though, since they learn native Japanese wago words first, and consider kanji words more advanced vocabulary, they tend to instinctively explain things using simpler native Japanese words. That's how they talk to kids, which interestingly, Chinese people find harder to understand. So it's kind of a funny cultural twist. Okay, that's all for today. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. I'm Yu. See you next time. 加呢